Harry certainly dominating the news, dominating front pages today in the court, not just of public opinion anymore, in the court, in the High Court. He's been facing a grilling in the witness box, first of 2 days of grilling by the barrister for Mirror Group newspapers in the phone hacking trial. This trial involves the claims that 33 different articles written over many, many years ago, dating all the way back to Prince Harry's childhood, were basically in the news and in the public domain as a result of illegal activity, whether it was phone hacking, blagging, people pretending to be someone they weren't to get information, or other nefarious means. Well, so far, he's certainly kept his cool, but has he actually gone any way to prove his case? He's been, lashing out at everyone he can, whether it is the government, he says it's a rock-bottom government, whether it's the media in general, whether it's, the whole of Britain, it seems to me. But there's no doubt at all. He claims that the media, the tabloid press in particular, is responsible for pretty much every woe in his life. There is no relationship, whether with his family, or whether with his girlfriends, his friends, everyone he went to school with, everyone he's ever worked with, that has not been destroyed by the media, by every little tidbit of his personal life ending up on the front pages. He says this has destroyed him, made him paranoid, cut his circle of friends, and broken down long-term relationships. And we'd all have a lot of sympathy for that if it wasn't for the fact that this is a man who's quite happy to give away his own private information, a man who is quite happy to sell his own private information, a man who is happy to put the video of him proposing to his wife in one of the most intimate moments of his life onto Netflix. Well, to the tune of many, many tens of millions of pounds in fees. Is this a man we can take seriously, saying that the intrusions into his privacy have damaged him when he intrudes into his own privacy all the time? Except he doesn't like it when a newspaper does it, but he's perfectly happy to do it when it's a journalist he's chosen, or when it's a talk show host like Oprah Winfrey, or when it's Netflix paying him large sums of money, or when it's his own book Spare and you're able to buy a copy. So it seems to me that his life is private, except when he is being paid to make it not private. Love to know where your thoughts lie. Do get in touch. Tweet me at TalkTV. Text the word talk to 87222. Before we go to our royal correspondent, Rupert Bell has been watching all this very closely. Candice Holdsworth is with me all this morning. She's a writer and commentator. Candice, I think a lot of people have a lot of sympathy for Duke of Sussex. He lost his mum at a young age, being in the royal family, goldfish bowl, horrible. But I always think it's fascinating. The people who are most angry about the media, it's terrible and something needs to be done, in capital letters, are always the people who actually lap this stuff up, buy the magazines, click on the hits on websites, look at this stuff on social media. They're desperate to see any bit of gossip, any pictures of royalty, and then they lambast the media for providing it.
Yes, no, they've created the market. I agree with you. In some ways, I have started to feel sorry for Prince Harry in many ways. He just looks like such a diminished
doesn't he?
Character. You know, he went from this really happy, handsome, well-loved person to now just this figure of derision, and it's a really, really, really sad downfall. And it shows you can have all the material wealth and privilege in the world, but it doesn't make you happy, and you aren't necessarily a happy person.
No, and look, I think we can understand the damage, the real damage that happened in his childhood, losing his mum and parental divorce, and it's bad enough that people are chatting about you in the school playground or in the pub, having it on the front pages, having it on the telly in the evening. It must be horrific. Of course, it must be. The question is whether he has proven his case, or will prove his case, that criminal activity was behind this. And there were a number of stories. There are 33 different stories that he claims were as a result of criminal activity. And a number of these stories, I mean, the defence barrister was able to point out, well, that story you'd actually done, and how did this information get out? Well, in this case, it was as a result of an interview you had done the day before. This one was from a statement that Buckingham Palace had put out the day before. I mean, this story had already been in the public domain beforehand. I mean, already quite a lot of these cases he's claiming are falling apart.
Yes, I mean, he's only able to provide assumptions that he has made. So far, there's nothing really concrete that he can point to. And it's so true. Like, a lot of this stuff was already in the public domain anyway, and that's been shown. And for him, it's possible that he had that thought that could have happened, but you actually need to be able to prove that.
Yeah, this is the difference. You're not on Oprah Winfrey, you're in a court of law. Well, let's talk to Rupert Bell. He's our royal correspondent. He's been watching this very avidly. Good morning to you, Rupert.
Good morning, Julia.
Another one of those quiet weeks for you on the royal rota. Front page of the Sun today. Harry's day in court. Me, Hewitt, and that two-faced beep at Burrell. This is one of the more interesting lines. The Duke talked about how reading these rumours about how James Hewitt might be his father. And also attacking the former Paul Burrell, the former butler to Diana, selling stories and the like after her death. He had an awful lot of people he wanted to point the finger at yesterday, didn't he?
He did. He's an angry man, basically, and it's coming out, and this is part of it. But as Candice alluded to, you can't just speculate. He has had to come up, and he should be coming up with stuff that is absolutely 100% proved that he was phone hacked. At the moment, he's saying, well, bit of this, bit of that. And then everything Andrew Green, who is the defence lawyer for MGN, the King's Counsel, he's basically been able to say, well, you've written stuff in spare, you've done, the articles were written before. So Harry has been left to look as if he's floundering a bit, and that is the problem for him. His anger is manifesting itself in the court, but you can't be angry. He has got to find a way of actually producing the facts.
Do you think he cares whether he wins this case or not? Because putting out that 55-page statement and what's appeared in court, he can make these claims, he can, criticise it all and sundry. He's got that, it's privileged and we're allowed to report on it because, of course, it's a court case. And he just wants to sort of just throw and sling as much mud around as possible. Doesn't really mind where it hits. I mean, he had to go at the government yesterday. I mean, I'm not sure the government are responsible for what's written. His argument is, of course, post-Leveson, or pre- and post-Leveson, they didn't actually instigate a load of the controls on what the media can do, what they can print, which he and others had demanded, and I'm glad they didn't personally. I think, this they caused. Well, look, we all know people have gone to jail. We know there was criminal activity in a number of different organisations. But the question is how else you go about dealing with this issue in terms of people's right to privacy versus public interest, and something that Prince Harry picked up on in his document, his 55-page document, and in court, the difference between public interest, i.e. we have a right to know, the lockdown files that Isabel Oakeshott had, those secret WhatsApp messages from Matt Hancock, and something that the public is interested in, which is, Prince Harry's got a new girlfriend. Now, and that was an interesting distinction.
It is an interesting distinction, but I think he does need to win this case, because if he wants to get public opinion back on his side, he's actually got to win this case to some extent to prove his case and say, look, I have been the permanent victim of phone hacking throughout my life. And that because at the moment, public opinion is against him. And the more he continues to seem like a tirade against everyone, look, he's probably got a pretty good case to think what he does about Peter Burrell, who's never held back and sort of making money out of his association with the late Princess Diana. And so, Paul Burrell, I should say.
I can't believe we've forgotten his name. He'll hate that. Let's call him Peter for the rest of the show.
Well, no, Peter Burrell's Frankie Dettori's agent, so I don't want to bring him into it, but that's another story. Forgive me, it's an early start, and it's been a long day yesterday. But Paul Burrell clearly is someone that Prince Harry is angry about. You've then got all the other, taking, as you say, a pop at the government. Well, a lot of these incidents happened when there was a Labour government around not controlling it. So he seems to want to have a tirade against everyone. And unless he can seem to have a sort of soft spot again, which he was extremely popular up until he got married, people were prepared to sort of forgive his
even after he got married. This is the big lie. Look, okay, there was that time when he was found, there was the Nazi uniform, there was a bit of the gallivanting around. I don't know anybody who didn't go, good on you, lad, you're the spare, you're a rich young lad, you got women falling over their feet. Why aren't you playing was it snooker naked in a Las Vegas hotel room? Why aren't you? That's exactly what many men would be happy to do. He fought for us in Afghanistan. I mean, all credit to the guy on that. I mean, he could have been having an easy life back in the UK. And I'm sorry, Meghan was welcomed with open arms. People look back at the press out. They keep quoting some stupid article that was in Mail Online about avocados as the evidence that apparently everyone was racist and hated her from word go. She was given a much easier, much nicer ride than Kate was. Waity Katie, the attacks on her parents for being sort of not posh. Certainly an easier ride than Camilla ever had, an easier ride than Fergie ever had, an easier ride than at times Diana ever had. I mean, he lives in cow cuckoo land. He seems to, you could give that man just like, a big bunch of flowers and he would manage to find, he would say that, oh, there's one that's dead and that was a terrible slight. He seems to be, and Meghan, they seem to look for every possible chink of evidence that people hate them.
Absolutely. And this is the sad fact that beforehand, the happy-go-lucky Harry, who was, people sort of, it's not easy being the spare. It isn't, because what do you do? And how do you find a sense of purpose? But he could have still had that sense of purpose within the royal family, found himself something that he could have done. But that's history now. But clearly, what is coming through this court case is the sense of paranoia that sort of can't believe anything. Everything must have been gotten through ill means, whether it is phone hacking or someone is spilling the beans and being unkind to him. And that is, it must be a dark and deep place for him. And,
I understand the paranoia. I think it's probably right to be paranoid. But again, I think a lot of this would be happening, regardless of any of these allegations. He is clearly a very damaged, hurt, angry and troubled man. I wonder whether he was ever happy-go-lucky. I'm not sure anybody who loses their mum at that age in the public eye like that is ever, and in the public eye, is going to be happy-go-lucky. I think it's a horrible existence being a royal. But the reality is there is a demand for news, for information, for photographs of these, of particularly the glamorous young royals, and that will happen to his children. It's going to happen to William and Kate's children. And I often think that, maybe it's actually those people who demand to see those pictures. I can live the rest of my life without ever seeing a picture of William and Kate's kids on their way to school on their first day. But the public demand it, and the very public that demand to see those pictures are the same public go, it's awful, all this press intrusion, it's terrible. But they want to see the pictures, don't they?
They do, and this is the problem for, I suppose, all members of the royal family, how to balance that, the service element and putting themselves out there and making sure that they can unwind and just lead as normal life as is possible. But by institution, it's very hard for them. You've got to find a way of managing it. And his insecurities, his trauma was writ large. And many would say the reason he was such a happy-go-lucky, he was trying to forget his trouble.
Yeah, and we know a lot of people do turn to the drink, to the drugs, to the, and all of that. I think the main thing for a lot of people, I'm sure you agree, is it's the difficulty people have with someone saying that my right to privacy, it's awful, people were invading my privacy. And we thought, he was going to go off to America to go and have a private life. No, he was going off to America so there couldn't be any intrusion, so that he could then monify, he could actually make tens of millions of pounds from selling his most private, intimate details about his life. And a lot of people have a lot more sympathy for this young man. He's not even that young anymore, is he? He's 38. But they would have a lot more sympathy for him if he himself had not basically sold his, his life to Netflix and sold his life to Penguin Books with his memoir Spare.
Well, this is the ultimate trouble for him, because he has commercialised his life, and then that has left him now in all situations, vulnerable to this kind of intrusion, because he's opened up and maybe the can of worms in Spare, and that's why the defence lawyer was quoting for the MGM great swathes of Spare at him. So this has been his problem, and so once you start trying to tell everything, that is why the royal family have mainly a mantra is just never explain, stay quiet, and that is. And it's worked well for them. Every time they put their head above a parapet and do a sort of tell-all interview, it causes them and whoever it is problems.
Bearing in mind, how that long documentary, all this time in court, Prince Andrew did one hour-long interview on Newsnight. We're still talking about that years later.